All right, today we're cracking open one of the most classified files in the entire Imperial Archives. This is a sealed record from the Ordo Chronos, and it details a reality-bending event so utterly impossible it was almost wiped from history completely. So yeah, let's get into this.
Right out of the gate, the official record tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a demonic incursion. It was a fundamental error, a glitch, in the very fabric of the universe itself. This is the story of what happens when something that shouldn't exist just does.
So what was this error? Well, an entity just appeared. But its arrival wasn't just weird, it was a total violation of every known rule of the galaxy. It broke the universe's foundational laws just by showing up. Now, what's so wild about this is how it details a complete absence of anything. I mean, think about it. In this galaxy, everything leaves a mark. A ship rips through the warp, a psyker even blinks, a demon whispers, it all sends out ripples. But this entity? Nothing. Not a peep. It simply was. It arrived without a whisper, and that silence was louder than any battle cry you can imagine.
And this, right here, shows you what the first real failure was. It wasn't a failure of weapons or armies, but a bureaucracy, of imagination. The entity was so far outside of what the Imperium could comprehend that their systems literally couldn't even see it. I mean, how do you file a report on something that your entire worldview insists is impossible?
So, okay, you've got this impossible being. What happens when it actually runs into the major players of the galaxy? Well, this is where that whole error in reality thing really starts to kick in, because this entity, it just refused to play by anyone else's rules.
Let's start with the orcs. Their whole reality is powered by belief and fighting, the Wa. The more they fight, the stronger they get. But this entity, it didn't fight back, not in any way they could process. It took apart their war engines without destroying them. It neutralized their biggest warriors without killing them. The Wa just fizzled out, not because he was stronger, but because he didn't feed their reality. The orcs couldn't turn him into a myth, so for them, he might as well have not existed at all. And then you've got chaos. Its entire game is based on consuming emotion, hate, fear, ambition, you name it. But when it came up against this entity, it found nothing to grab onto. There was no fear to twist, no rage to stoke. And here's the key thing. The warp didn't recoil because it was wounded. It recoiled because it was unfed. For the first time, chaos found something it simply could not metabolize. It was totally indigestible to the gods themselves.
And this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? The orcs couldn't fight him because he didn't fit into their story. Chaos couldn't corrupt him because he was like an ideological void to them. And the Adeptus Mechanicus, they called him a biological heresy. And why? Because here was this perfect physical form that never broke down, never needed upgrades, and, worst of all, didn't need worship. A weapon that doesn't need faith is basically the biggest insult you can throw at the Mechanicus.
So, if you can't fight him, can't corrupt him, and can't even categorize him, what was the real threat? This is where the file gets properly chilling. The entity's greatest weapon wasn't his strength. It was an idea.
Well, the Inquisition, of course, had a name for it: ontological contamination. This wasn't some plague that attacks the body. No, this was a disease of the soul, of the entire galaxy. A threat to the core beliefs that hold the whole grim, dark universe together.
And the symptoms of this disease? It was hope. On the worlds he visited, guardsmen started asking why they had to be thrown into suicide charges. Normal people started to think that maybe, just maybe, they could get through the day without constant, terrified prayer. Governors even started to wonder if being relentlessly cruel was actually the only way to keep things from falling apart. He was basically dismantling the entire psychological engine of the Imperium just by being there.
And that led to the Inquisition's final, absolutely terrifying verdict. This thing wasn't an alien you could just purge or a daemon you could banish. It was worse. It was a counter-narrative. It was a story that directly contradicted the Imperium's fundamental truth, that life is cheap and endless sacrifice is the only way. A competing idea, it turns out, is way more dangerous than any fleet.
So they're backed into a corner. Unable to fight, corrupt, or contain this thing, the Imperium was forced to make one final, desperate play. They decided to use the one weapon they had left, a weapon they keep locked away from absolutely everyone, including themselves.
And that's the ultimate question, isn't it? How in the galaxy do you possibly win against a power that operates so far outside your reality that you can't even lay a finger on it?
The answer is so simple, and it's just terrifying. You don't defeat him, you break him. You show him why he's wrong. Not wrong by his standards, but wrong according to the horrifying, brutal math of this specific galaxy.
So the Inquisition brought him to Terra. They didn't send an assassin, they gave him a guided tour. They took him to the Golden Throne and they showed him the unvarnished truth. Not the God Emperor of propaganda, but the reality. A 10,000-year-old psychic corpse, a screaming engine of bone and agony, whose fading light is the only thing holding back total, absolute damnation for everyone.
And in that moment, staring at the foundational horror of the Imperium, the fact that this galaxy runs on sacrifice, that cruelty actually is a function of survival, for the first time, the entity hesitated. He finally got it. To save this galaxy by his rules would be to doom it completely.
And that's how the Incursion ends. Not with a big explosion or some final battle, but with a quiet, philosophical surrender. A mutual rejection between a being and a galaxy that were just fundamentally incompatible.
He just left. He understood that to fix this broken, bleeding universe, he couldn't be a savior. No, he'd have to become a tyrant, the very thing he stood against. He would have to continue the cycle of horror just to stop it, and he just couldn't do it.
And so we get the final entry in this Omega-level archive. The idea that this entity brought with him, the very core of his being, was given its final, official classification by the Imperium. Hope. Final classification. A contaminant. A pathogen that has to be purged at all costs.
The file closes with this one last thought from its keeper. The entity wasn't a failure because he was weak. He failed because he was too good for a reality that literally cannot survive goodness. He served as a terrifying reminder of a better universe that can never, ever exist here. And that just leaves you wondering, what does it say about your reality when the greatest possible threat is a truly good man?